Long ago, the world was a very mysterious place. People looked at the stars and watched objects fall to the ground, but they did not truly understand why. There were no maps for the laws of nature. Everything seemed like magic or simple luck. In this quiet, old world, a small boy was born who would eventually change everything we know about the earth and the deep, dark sky. The story begins in the winter of 1640, in a small stone house in England called Woolsthorpe Manor. It was a cold and difficult time. On Christmas Day, a baby was born far too early. He was so tiny that his mother said he could fit inside a small mug. No one expected him to survive the night, but this tiny baby had a very strong spirit. This child was named Isaac Newton. His start in life was not easy. His father had died 3 months before he was even born, so Isaac never knew him. The house was quiet and the family was poor. From his very first breath, Isaac was a fighter. He survived those first difficult weeks, though he remained a small and physically weak child for many years. When Isaac was only 3 years old, his life changed again in a sad way. His mother, Hannah, decided to marry a wealthy man from a nearby village. However, this man did not want to raise another man's son. Hannah moved away to live with her new husband, leaving little Isaac behind at the manor. He was left in the care of his grandmother, feeling completely alone. Isaac grew up feeling a deep sense of anger and abandonment. He stayed on the farm, surrounded by sheep and grey skies, but his heart was full of pain. He hated his stepfather and felt betrayed by his mother. This isolation shaped him. Instead of playing with other children, he spent his time looking at the world around him and wondering how everything worked. Life on the farm was hard and very lonely for young Isaac. He had to find his own ways to stay busy and happy. Before we continue his amazing journey from the farm to the stars, I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Please share your thoughts and subscribe so you never miss the rest of our stories about the great people of history. While other boys were out running and playing sports, Isaac was usually found sitting under a tree or inside a barn. He was not a typical farm boy. He didn't care much for the animals or the crops. He was more interested in the way the wind blew or how the shadows moved across the ground during the day. He was a silent observer of the natural world. His relationship with his family remained very tense. When his mother eventually returned years later after her second husband died, she brought 3 half-siblings with her. Isaac did not feel like he belonged in this new family unit. He felt like an outsider in his own home. This feeling of being different stayed with him for the rest of his long and famous life. To escape his sadness, Isaac turned to books. He began to carry a small notebook with him everywhere. He wrote down observations about everything he saw. He asked questions that other people thought were strange. Why does the sun change position? Why do some things break and others bend? He was teaching himself to see the patterns that everyone else ignored because they were too busy. Isaac also discovered that he was very good at building things. He had a natural talent for mechanics. He built complex wooden models and small machines. He even created a tiny mill that was powered by a mouse. The mouse would run on a wheel to turn the gears. It was clear that his mind was moving much faster than the quiet life of a farmer allowed. One of his most impressive early inventions was a set of sundials. He placed them all around the house so he could tell the time perfectly. He even built a water clock that worked with great precision. Neighbors began to notice that the quiet Newton boy was actually quite brilliant. They started coming to him to ask for the correct time, realizing his mind was something special. Despite his intelligence, Isaac was a very unhappy teenager. He was often bullied at school because he was quiet and different. One day, a bully kicked him in the stomach. Instead of crying, Isaac challenged the boy to a fight and won. But he wasn't satisfied with just winning a physical fight. He decided to defeat the bully by becoming the top student in the entire school. His mother wanted him to be a farmer and take over the family estate. She pulled him out of school to work the land, but Isaac was a terrible farmer. He would let the sheep escape while he sat by a stream reading a book. He was completely uninterested in money or land. Eventually, a teacher convinced his mother that Isaac belonged at a university, not in a muddy field. At the age of 18, Isaac packed his few belongings and left the farm. He was heading for Cambridge, one of the most famous universities in the world. For the first time in his life, he was leaving the isolation of Woolsthorpe. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he was finally moving toward a place where his questions might finally be answered. As the carriage moved away from his childhood home, Isaac felt a mix of fear and excitement. He was leaving behind the boy who felt alone and becoming the man who would explore the universe. He had no friends and very little money, but he had a mind that never stopped working. The world was about to meet the greatest scientist it had ever known. When Isaac arrived at Cambridge University, he did not enter as a wealthy or popular student. Because he had very little money, he started as a subsizar. This meant he was a servant student. He had to clean the rooms of the richer students, carry their wood for fires, and serve them food at dinner. He lived on the edges of the university, working hard just to stay there. Even though he was a servant, Isaac didn't mind. He wasn't there for the social life or the parties. He was there for the library. He spent his days and nights reading the works of great thinkers like Aristotle and Descartes. However, he soon realized that many of the old ideas were wrong. He wrote in his notebook, "Plato is my friend, but truth is my best friend." Newton was not a star student in the eyes of his professors. He didn't follow the standard curriculum very well. He was too busy following his own interests. He became obsessed with mathematics and the way light moves. While other students were sleeping, Isaac was performing experiments on his own eyes or staring at the sun until he almost went blind. His curiosity was almost dangerous. In 1665, just as Isaac finished his degree, a terrible shadow fell over England. The Great Plague had arrived. It was a deadly disease that spread quickly through crowded cities. People were dying by the thousands. To save the students, Cambridge University closed its doors and sent everyone home. Isaac had to return to his mother's farm, the very place he had tried to escape. Today, we might call this a lockdown. For most people, it was a time of fear and boredom. But for Isaac Newton, it was the most productive time of his entire life. He spent 18 months in the silence of the countryside. Without the distractions of the university or his chores as a servant, his mind was finally free to focus on the deepest secrets of nature. This period is now known as the Annus Mirabilis, or the Year of Wonders. In that small farmhouse, away from the rest of the world, Newton began to develop the ideas that would change science forever. He didn't have a laboratory or expensive equipment. He only had his notebooks, his pens, and his incredible ability to think about one problem for hours without stopping. He began to think about motion. He wondered why things move and why they stop. He looked at the moon and wondered why it stayed in the sky instead of flying away into space. He began to fill his notebooks with complex math that did not even exist yet. He was creating a new language of numbers to describe the physical world around him. The farm was quiet, but Isaac's mind was a storm of activity. He would often forget to eat or sleep. His mother thought he was lazy because he would sit still for hours, staring at nothing. In reality, he was calculating the weights of planets and the speed of falling objects. He was finding a hidden order in a world that looked messy and unpredictable. One of the things that made Isaac different was his focus. He could hold a single mathematical problem in his head for days. He didn't wait for inspiration. He worked until the answer appeared. He believed that the universe was like a giant clock, and if he could understand the gears, he could understand the mind of the creator. This was his great mission. During this time of silence, he asked himself, why does that apple always fall straight down to the ground? Why doesn't it go sideways or up into the air? He realized that the earth must be pulling the apple toward its center. There had to be an invisible force that draws all things toward each other. This was the birth of the idea of gravity, a force no one had named before. Then, Isaac looked up past the trees and saw the moon hanging in the sky. He had a sudden aha moment. He wondered if the same force that pulled the apple to the ground was also pulling on the moon. If gravity pulled the moon, why didn't the moon crash into the Earth like the apple did? It was a question that required a completely new way of thinking. He realized that the moon is actually falling, but it is also moving forward very fast. Because the Earth is round, the moon falls around the Earth in a circle. Imagine a ball tied to a string. If you spin it around your head, the string keeps the ball from flying away. Newton realized that gravity is like an invisible string that keeps the planets in their orbits. This was a massive discovery. Before this, people thought the laws of the Earth and the laws of the heavens were different. Newton showed that the universe follows the same rules everywhere. The same force that makes a pen fall off your desk is the same force that controls the stars. It was a beautiful, simple idea that connected the entire universe together. Newton didn't stop at gravity. He wanted to explain exactly how objects move. He developed 3 simple laws that we still use today. The first law says that things like to keep doing what they are already doing. A ball on the floor will stay there forever unless someone kicks it. A moving ball will keep moving unless something, like friction, stops it. The second law explains how force and mass work together. If you push a small toy car, it goes fast. If you push a heavy real car with the same strength, it barely moves. It sounds simple, but Newton put this into a mathematical formula that allowed people to build machines, bridges, and eventually rockets that could travel to space. The third law is perhaps the most famous. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. If you push against a wall, the wall is actually pushing back against you with the same amount of force. When a bird flies, its wings push the air down, and the air pushes the bird up. This law explains how everything from walking to jet engines works. Newton spent years turning these ideas into a book. He called it the Principia. It is considered one of the most important books ever written. In it, he used math to prove his laws. He showed how the tides in the ocean are caused by the moon's gravity and how the planets move in ovals, not perfect circles. He was mapping the logic of creation. Writing this book was a huge struggle. Isaac was so focused that he often looked like a ghost. He would forget to eat, and his clothes were often messy. He would walk into a room and forget why he was there, because his mind was busy calculating the mass of the sun. He was a man possessed by the need for truth. For a long time, Isaac was the only person in the entire world who understood how the universe moved. Can you imagine the weight of that? He looked at the stars and saw a complex, beautiful machine, while everyone else just saw points of light. It was a lonely kind of greatness. He was holding the secrets of the world in his hands, waiting for others to catch up. Gravity became his most famous legacy. It changed how we see our place in the world. We weren't just standing on a rock, we were being held by a powerful, invisible force. This made the world feel safer and more predictable. People began to feel that the universe wasn't scary or random, but something that could be understood through logic and study. Newton's laws were so accurate that they were not changed for over 200 years. Even today, when NASA sends a satellite to another planet, they use Newton's math to guide it. His invisible strings are still the foundation of how we navigate the stars. He turned the mysterious sky into a predictable map for all of humanity to follow. The emotional impact of his work was huge. He went from a lonely boy on a farm to the man who explained the cosmos. But the fame didn't make him a happy person. He was still the same sensitive man who feared criticism. He was proud of his work, but he was also terrified that people would try to steal his ideas or tell him he was wrong. As we move forward, we see that Isaac was a man of many layers. He was a scientific genius, but he was also a person with deep flaws and a difficult personality. He had unlocked the secrets of gravity, but he still struggled to understand the people around him. The next part of his life would bring even more conflict and discovery. While Isaac was famous for gravity, he was equally obsessed with light. He wanted to know what light was made of. At the time, people thought white light was pure. They believed that colors were created when light hit something dirty or dark. Isaac disagreed. He decided to prove his theory with a famous experiment using a simple glass prism. He sat in a dark room and let a thin beam of sunlight hit the prism. The light split into a rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Then he did something even smarter. He put a second prism in front of the rainbow, and all the colors combined back into a single beam of white light. He had proved that white light is actually a mixture of all colors. This discovery was revolutionary. It explained why the sky is blue and why rainbows appear after a storm. But when he shared his work with the Royal Society in London, not everyone was happy. Other scientists had their own ideas about light. They didn't like a young professor from Cambridge telling them that their old theories were completely wrong. One of these scientists was Robert Hooke. Hooke was a powerful and famous man in the scientific world. He criticized Newton's work publicly. This was a huge mistake because Isaac did not handle criticism well. He was incredibly sensitive. Instead of discussing the ideas calmly, Isaac became angry and went into a long period of silence and isolation. Isaac's obsession with his work was legendary. He would often stay awake all night, writing by candlelight. If he had an idea at dinner, he would stop eating and start writing on the table. He simply forgot the world existed outside of his research. He had no wife, no children, and very few friends. His work was his entire life. He was also very secretive. He often waited years to publish his discoveries. He was afraid that if he shared his ideas, other people would argue with him. This created a lot of drama in his life. He spent a lot of time writing long, angry letters to his rivals. He was a genius, but he was also a very difficult man to get along with. The rivalry with Robert Hooke lasted for many years. It was a battle of egos. Hooke claimed that he had come up with some of the ideas about gravity first. This made Isaac furious. He even tried to remove Hooke's name from history. When Isaac later became the president of the Royal Society, it is said that he made sure the only portrait of Hooke was destroyed. This dark side of Isaac shows us that even the greatest minds have human weaknesses. He was brilliant at math, but he struggled with kindness and forgiveness. He lived in a world of absolute truths and numbers, so he found it hard to deal with the messy emotions of other people. For Isaac, being right was the most important thing in the world. During these middle years, Isaac also spent a lot of time studying things that weren't scientific at all. He was very interested in alchemy. He spent hours in his lab trying to find a way to turn lead into gold. He also studied the Bible deeply, looking for hidden codes and trying to predict the end of the world. He was a man searching for the ultimate truth in every possible place. He once said, "I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people." This quote tells us a lot about his life. He understood the stars perfectly, but he felt lost when it came to human nature. He was more comfortable with the stars than with his neighbors. His life was a journey between the cold logic of science and the heat of human conflict. Despite his difficult personality, his fame continued to grow. People across Europe were talking about the great Newton. He became a symbol of the Enlightenment, a time when reason and science began to replace superstition. He was the hero of a new age, even if he spent most of his time hiding in his study at Cambridge, surrounded by dusty books. One interesting story about his focus involves his cat. It is said that he cut 2 holes in his door, a large one for his cat and a small one for her kittens. He didn't realize that the kittens could just follow their mother through the large hole. Even the smartest man in the world could sometimes miss the most obvious things in daily life. Eventually, the stress of his work and his fights with other scientists led to a nervous breakdown. For a while, he couldn't sleep or eat at all. He began to write strange letters to his few friends, accusing them of things that weren't true. It was a very dark time for him. He decided he needed a change. He needed to leave the quiet world of Cambridge behind. At the age of 53, Isaac Newton decided to start a completely new career. He moved from the university to the busy, crowded city of London. He was finished with being a lonely professor. He was about to become a powerful government official. This was a surprising move for a man who had spent his life staring at prisms and stars. His time in London would be very different from his time at the farm or the university. He was no longer just a thinker. He was a man of action. He was about to use his brilliant mind to solve a problem that affected every person in England, the problem of money. The final chapter of his life was about to begin in the heart of the city. In London, Isaac Newton took a job as the warden of the Royal Mint. The Mint was the place where all the country's coins were made. At first, people thought this was just a quiet job for a famous old man to retire. They thought he would just sit in an office and sign papers. They were very wrong. Isaac took his new job very seriously. At that time, England's money was in a mess. Many people were clipping coins, which meant they would cut off small bits of silver from the edges of the coins to sell. Others were making fake coins out of cheap metals. This was making the economy weak. Isaac decided to use his scientific mind to fix the currency and catch the criminals who were destroying it. He supervised the Great Recoinage, where every coin in England was brought in, melted down, and made again with better designs. He added little ridges to the edges of the coins so people couldn't clip them anymore. If you look at a coin today, you might still see those little lines on the edge. That was Isaac Newton's idea to stop thieves 300 years ago. But Isaac wasn't just an administrator. He became a detective. He would go into the dangerous parts of London in disguise to find the people making fake money. He interviewed criminals in prison and built cases against them. He was as focused on catching thieves as he had been on calculating the movement of the planets. He was a man of justice. His most famous target was a clever counterfeiter named William Challoner. Challoner was a master at making fake coins and had avoided the police for years. He even tried to trick Newton by pretending to help him. But Newton was smarter. He spent years gathering evidence and eventually sent Challoner to trial. Newton never gave up once he started a task. While living in London, Isaac became a very wealthy and powerful man. He lived in a large house and had many servants. He was no longer the poor servant student who cleaned floors. He was now the president of the Royal Society, the most prestigious scientific group in the world. He ruled the world of science with an iron hand for over 20 years. In 1705, Queen Anne visited Cambridge and gave Isaac a great honor. She made him a knight. From that day on, he was Sir Isaac Newton. This was a huge moment. He was the first scientist ever to be knighted for his work. It showed that society was finally beginning to value knowledge and discovery as much as they valued military victory. In his final years, Sir Isaac looked back on his life. He was still a difficult man, but he had become a legend. He had changed how we see light, how we calculate change, and how we understand the very force that holds us to the ground. He had become the most respected person in England and perhaps in the whole world. Despite his fame, he remained humble about his discoveries in a very famous way. He once said, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." He meant that he couldn't have made his discoveries without the thinkers who came before him. It was a rare moment of grace from a man who often fought with his peers. He also compared himself to a small boy playing on the beach. He said he was just finding a prettier shell or a smoother pebble than usual, while the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before him. Even after all he had learned, he knew that there were still so many mysteries in the universe that he would never understand. Sir Isaac Newton died in his sleep in 1727, at the age of 84. It was a very long life for that time. He was buried in Westminster Abbey, a place usually reserved for kings and queens. Thousands of people came to his funeral to honor the man who had brought light to the darkness and order to the stars. The lonely boy from the farm had finished his journey. He started with nothing but a notebook and a lot of questions, and he ended as one of the most important people who ever lived. His story is not just about science. It is about the power of a single mind to change the way all of humanity sees the world. As we look back on the life of Isaac Newton, we see a story of incredible persistence. He faced a difficult childhood, the loss of his parents, and a world that didn't always understand him. Yet, he never stopped asking why. He showed us that even if you feel alone or different, your ideas can have the power to move mountains. His journey from the quiet orchard in Woolsthorpe to the Royal Mint in London is a reminder that our beginnings do not define our endings. He took his isolation and turned it into a strength. He used his silence to listen to the secrets of nature. He proved that curiosity is one of the most valuable traits a human can have. Newton's legacy is all around us today. Every time you look at a rainbow, use a calculator, or see a satellite in the sky, you are seeing the result of his work. He gave us the tools to build the modern world. He showed us that the universe is not a place of chaos, but a place of beautiful mathematical harmony. The lesson of his life is simple. Never stop looking at the world with wonder. Even an apple falling from a tree can lead to a discovery that changes history. You don't need a giant laboratory to start. You just need to pay attention to the small things that everyone else ignores. Truth is often hiding in plain sight. We should also remember that he was a human being. He was sometimes angry, sometimes scared, and often very lonely. This makes his achievements even more impressive. He wasn't a perfect hero. He was a person who worked incredibly hard to overcome his own limitations. His genius was the result of his incredible focus and dedication. Understanding such a complex story is a journey in itself. Just as Isaac spent hours studying his books, taking the time to listen and reflect on history helps us grow. It opens our minds to new perspectives and helps us understand the roots of the world we live in today. Every story we finish makes our own world a little bit larger. The universe is wide, and there is still so much to discover. Your potential is just as vast. Isaac Newton was once just a tiny baby who wasn't expected to live, and he grew up to map the stars. What amazing things could you achieve if you followed your own curiosity with the same intensity and passion? Thank you for joining me on this journey through the life of a true giant. Isaac Newton taught us that the stars are within our reach if we only have the courage to look up and the patience to think. Until next time, keep wondering, keep asking questions, and never stop exploring the incredible world around you.